Hi, everybody. CC and JT from the CC and JT Amateur Hour. We're continuing our tradition of having writers from around the world come on our podcast and talk about their craft and their journey. And we've learned so much, but one thing we've learned really that's just resonates through almost every podcast is even though we are located in different places, even though we have different genres, even though we write weird stuff, we also have a lot in common. We all face the same struggles. We all face the same challenges. So, our hope is with this podcast that writers watching this will realize that they are not alone. And we have another fantastic writer here today. Wow, I've been looking forward to this one because Ruben, reading your biography on your website is just like this. This is good. This is going to be great because when we talk about the writer's journey, sometimes it's a mental journey, but in Ruben's case, it's a heck of a physical journey. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into that. Welcome aboard, Ruben.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here and looking forward to sharing part of my life and part of my writing.
Excellent. So, Ruben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and introduce your books to our audience?
Okay, my name is Ruben Elustondo. I was born in Argentina and I have a long way going around the world working. My life started there and I went to school there, grew up, went to college, and was not an easy life. We were not, we were sort of low middle class, so we didn't have any big needs, but we were on a tight budget. So when I went to college, had to work full time. So I was doing 8 hours job at the bank and then going to school. And then at the end was even crazier because I didn't like the job at the bank for a long-term career, and I decided to go to an internship with a multinational corporation that changed my life. But that last semester was sort of 8 hours at the bank, 4 hours at the internship, and then going to school. So it was pretty tough. But I'm glad that I did that because I wanted to do it and I was successful. So that was a change in my life because with this corporation, they sent me to the US back in 1978. And that was supposed to be a 2 year sort of training development program, but they kept changing that and giving me new assignments every 2 3 years. So I never went back to Argentina working there. So my life then went through Latin America. I think I went through every single country in South America, most of the country in Central America, and then I even had a global job at some point in time. So I went to Europe and I went to the Far East on business trips. So those were long journeys. And probably that was an influence in writing because in those long journeys, at the beginning you sort of work in the airplane, and then I got tired of that and said, I better read something that I like. So I began reading books, and then I started getting more acquainted with mystery books and thriller books and all that stuff. So that was my background in terms of knowing the world. And then I have a 3 year assignment in Venezuela and a 3 year assignment in Mexico. So that sort of gave me a nice view of different people, different cultures that sort of gave me an influence also in my writing, because at the end I think that we may perceive that people are different, but at the end we are all the same. And sometimes it's sort of what others tell us, or stereotypes, that if you go to France, then your filters in your mind says, oh, those people are rude. So the first time you have a little incident, you say, oh yeah, they are rude, and you keep repeating that. And that's not true. You have people of all types everywhere. So that was a big learning. And that's why I'm writing and trying to reflect different experiences in life. So that was basically my life. I retired then. And after retiring, I decided I need to do something that's interesting for me. So I tried different things. The company gave me sort of a set of courses on different things. So I took photography and I took, books, writing, and I took golf. But none of those really made me really happy. So I kept doing. Then I did some graphite writing, sort of drawing. So I did that, and then I decided to write a novel. During my time at the corporation, I thought about writing, but I thought about writing something about management. And then I said, well, so many consultants that I don't think I'm going to do that. And I didn't know that there are so many writers writing about thrillers and all that. So that was not a good assumption. But anyway, I wrote my first novel. That was back in 2019. I published that in 2020. And then after that, I saw people or friends telling me, you wrote a novel, that's so interesting, congratulations, and this and that. So that encouraged me to keep writing. So far I have written 8 novels and one sort of summary of small poems in Spanish that I just published last year. So that's basically my journey through writing. So I cannot say that I was born or when I was a child I was thinking, oh, I'm going to be a writer. I never thought about that, but then life changes your things and you learn new things and you start enjoying new things. So I love writing, it's like a hobby, and I just went from there. So that's sort of my journey on writing.
So you mentioned something that struck a chord with me. You've traveled thousands and thousands of miles. You've seen people and writers. As you said, you are a lifelong writer, but writers are professional observers, and we're professional people watchers. So over these years of your travels, what do you think, what were some of the things that you saw from, people from around the world that made it into your books? We're talking about so what did you see in people that made it into your books?
Yeah, as I say, I don't think it's especially something from some place in the world. As I say, I think that at the end, the emotions and the behaviors deep end are the same. So you can have difference in cultures or the way you eat or the way you get together with people. But at the end, it's the same. So what I write in my books could happen in the US, like I do, but could happen anywhere in the world. That's my feeling, because I try to get to the reader in something that they can identify with themselves. And I think writing is universal. It's not just, okay, you're a US writer or you are a British writer. I think can fit everywhere. So that was one learning that I applied to my writing, and I hope it works. But yeah, that's a big thing about having traveled so much, that you get to know people. And the more you get to know people, the more you realize, well, he or she is not too different from me. So I can relate to that.
Yeah, because really, one thing a psychology teacher said to me many years ago is that, no matter where you go, no matter who you see, a smile is a smile. A smile is universal. Everybody does,
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because, I mean, when you see people smiling, that's universal language. When you see people crying, it's a universal language. The suffering is the same all over the world. The happiness is the same all over the world. So, yeah, we are just human beings, and we need to connect some way. And writing is a good way to connect. I'm sorry, I have some allergies. Yeah.
Completely understand. I have the same thing happening here.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you like to write mystery thrillers, and I think in your bio it said that you enjoy Grisham and James Patterson. So was there anything in particular that ever happened that drew you to mysteries, or was it just the books that you've been reading over the years?
I think it was just, again, while traveling, I was trying to find something entertaining, and that would keep my mind off the corporation and off the job or whatever presentation. And mysteries and thriller was something very appropriate, I think, because you're always trying to figure out, okay, what happened next? It's like watching a movie. So that was sort of led me to go into that genre, and I sort of enjoy that, creating sort of an environment where you can sort of suspect who is doing something, and at the end you come out with something that is totally unexpected. I enjoy that. So yeah, that's the way.
No, that's perfectly fine. And I think that you said that, although you've been writing for a very long time, I believe you said that you didn't publish until just a very short time ago as a writer. So you would be count, quote unquote, to use an American cliche, a late bloomer. But
Yeah.
still, there must have been a thrill because when you're a late bloomer, you got to hold a book, your creation, despite all of your other professional achievements. Completing that book, holding that book, must have been right there in the top five of your life. How it feel?
Well, I mean, I guess my first experience in writing was back in the late 90s. I
Okay.
was in Mexico City. I was by myself because of a special situation with the company, and I spent 3 years there. My family was in Houston. I was commuting every weekend, so that was pretty tough. And being down there during the week was pretty lonely. At the beginning was sort of, okay, I'm here, it's a new job, big responsibility, and I worked long hours and then took some work home because I was alone, so doesn't matter, right? But then I realized, no, that's wrong, because I'm here because this company is leaving me here far from my family, and on top of that, I'm going to spend more hours just working, and say, I need to stop that. I try to find something that would be like a hobby to entertain myself those hours. So I remember I bought a bunch of books about drawings because when I was a child I liked drawings. And then one day I sort of wrote a short poem, like, 3 or 4 paragraphs or something like that. And I look at that and say, I sort of enjoy that. And then I keep writing, and at the end I wrote like 75 of those, and I just published those last year. And they were just reflections on people behavior, on profiles of people. I kept those down there without publishing because then I came back to the US and I was back in the corporate world and long hours and all that, so I didn't have time to publish everything. And then when I retired, I found the time to do that. So I wasn't really paying a lot of attention or complaining to myself, well, I have these poems there and I'm not publishing them. They were sort of in the background. So I didn't feel that that was a need or an urgency to publish them. But then when I had the time, I felt, yeah, I can write and publish something and try to see how it works. And from them, I sort of enjoy it, so I just keep writing.
It
Yeah.
does get under your skin.
Yeah, I was right there and then sort of surfaced. So
So you've written both fiction and poetry. Do you prefer one type of writing over the other one?
well, as I say, it was two different stages in my life. The poetry was in an environment where I was sort of lonely and I was trying to reflect on characters, situations. I mean, they were short poems. Like one time I was in an airplane going back to Mexico, and then I say, oh, I can write about that. And I say, how people feel about in the airplane, why people remember to pray when there's a turbulence and then forget about that. So I wrote those type of things that I saw, and then I wrote about different people in the office, the big boss that feels that he's over everywhere and not paying attention to the needs of people, or the one that is always complaining, or about the Mexicans or the Argentinians or women, or so that's where my inspiration was, just observing around and writing something. Now, when I went back to the second part of my writing career, that is the novels and the mystery, was sort of, oh, I want to write something that is like watching a movie. The difference is that in the movie someone tells you what's happening, and in my writing I develop what's happening, and that's the fun of it. And say, okay, what could happen next? And then that goes on. So those were the two different things. If I prefer one over the other, I would say right now I'm writing the novels and I keep doing that. I still need to finish one of those poems. That was a long poem, like the story, whole story, like, I don't know, Don Quixote or something like that. So that was a long story that I never finished. So it's somewhere there, and one day I'm going to get back to that, but it's not in the short term that I plan in that.
Okay, so you mentioned Don Quixote, Cervantes,
Yeah.
the absolute classic. In your bio, you mentioned some of the later, we'll just say modern classics. But what were the other classics that you, as a young person, grew up on
Yeah, when I was young, I was reading a lot. I was not writing, but I was reading a lot. Whatever they gave me at school and whatever I could find around. But all sorts of things, like for example, I don't know, Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and a lot of Spanish authors, Borges and some others. There was one that was sort of the type of Cervantes that was a local uh, person in Argentina, and I sort of was amazed with that guy because it was a story, long story, that was written also in verses, rhymes, and at the same time that he wrote the story, he was leaving sort of messages about how you live your life or what is just or unjust and all that. And the story was pretty simple. It was like, in the US you have the time of the Far West where the soldiers were going down and people fighting and all that. And this was the same. The government was trying to get more land and they got the help of the big landowners, and the big landowners have these people just working for them. They call it the gauchos, it's like the cowboys. And the main character is one of those people, and he sort of describes the injustice of being sent to fight, and then the new land would go back to the owners. And so he goes through all that, and he escapes from that, and he becomes a rebel and all that. But I think the nice thing about that was that it's a story, and it's a lot of teaching about life and concept that sort of keep in your mind. So that was interesting.
So you mentioned that this author was a local, maybe contemporary of yours. Are you connecting with any other local authors as you're continuing to write your books, or is this pretty much a solo kind of endeavor for you?
Yeah, I'm not connecting with people in Argentina. Actually, I don't have too many family there, so I don't have local authors that I know of. And so this is just me and writing and reading and probably having more connections with people in the US than in Argentina, so not Spanish speaking. So I'm more of a solo writer, if you want to write it that way.
Here's a question that we ask writers, because this is, of course, a very controversial subject in our profession, and that is artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah.
Some people love it. A lot of writers hate it and just slam the door on it. So what is your professional view of artificial intelligence in the writing business?
I think that we need to keep using the writers, and artificial intelligence maybe is a tool that can help sometimes, but I don't see a book being written by AI. I can see sometimes you say, well, I don't know how to say this, or then you say, well, I go to AI and find a better way to say it. I mean, that's useful. Just leaving AI to do your job, make happen, I don't know, but it's not what I would prefer. Yeah, I don't like that.
Yes, that's a good point. And we've heard that AI is kind of filtering into everything like our writing programs for
Yeah.
soft word. So do you have a preferred writing program that you use when you're working?
No, I just write on Word. And then if I do some preliminary editing, I go to something like Grammarly, but then I don't use any other special programs. I just go the old-fashioned way, Word and corrections, and keep going. Yeah.
And one last question, because of we sometimes we get questions about this a lot, and it's kind of, I think it's kind of interesting. What is your writing routine? Are you a wake up and start writing kind of person, or are you are you a go through your day, get your chores done, and then as a reward at the end of the day you write, or is it a combination?
I think it's sort of a combination because I'm not the one that is going to be writing or waking up at midnight and start writing. I don't do that. But sometimes when I get going with a book, I may write, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day for a week. But during the day, not crazy hours. And then I may stop writing, and I don't feel bad about that. Like right now, I started a book, but I'm not writing every day. So that's okay with me, because to me at this age it's like a hobby. I do it because I enjoy it, It's not, I do it because I need to earn money to live from this. So I don't have that urgency in writing. I have the enjoyment in writing, and that's what I do. So there's no routine. It just depends on the day, and I go from there.
Yep. No, your passion is absolutely coming through. You love you do the writing because you love the writing. Sometimes we've interviewed folks and we say, what about your writing? They just said, well, I kind of have to do it because I started it. But that's obviously not the case. That's obviously not the case with you.
No, it's not my
So we're
case.
going to segue. We're going to move over to the second part of our podcast. And what we've done is we've taken questions from James Lipton's Inside the Actor's Studio. It was a tool he used to get to know actors that he interviewed, and we modified this for writers like yourself. We did send you the questions beforehand, so you had a chance to look them over. So we're not springing these on you or surprising you.
Yeah.
So, but for you, what was your I'm a real honest to goodness writer moment?
Well, I would say that probably there were several. Of course, the one that is typical is, okay, I got my first book, printed copy in front of me with my name. That's I feel that I'm writing. I can say another one is that I received in the mail the certificate from the copyright office, and I say, wow, I'm going to be in the Library of Congress and this is going to stay there forever. So I'm a writer. Then I would say people and friends and people that knew me from my office when I used to work, and they say, are you writing a book? I mean, that's amazing. Go, keep going. This is wonderful. You should keep doing that. So I say, well, looks like I'm a writer. So yeah, those were sort of the moments that I say, yeah, feels good. And it's not just one book, it's just keep going with that. And people ask, okay, when is the next book coming? And then you feel that, okay, I'm part of this big family of writers.
Good way to describe that.
Really is. So we've discussed a few different writers, but if you had a writing role model, who would you say that is and why?
Yeah, I would say, well, we already touched on that, but I would say I don't have one that is sort of a role model. I like several of them. In my genre, we talk about Patterson or Grisham, and I see the way they write and they keep you hooked to the book, and I say, oh, I wish I can do that. So instead of role model, I mentioned before these people that can write long books in sort of a shape of a poem and leaving a message and teaching something about that. That's something that is very difficult to do, and I wish I can do that. But that's, I don't know if you call it role model, but it's something that I would enjoy doing. Yeah, and then there are many authors in the genre that I like.
Excellent. That's a good answer. So, what do you love about writing?
About writing, that you have a sense of freedom, that you can be anywhere you want, you can be anybody you want, because when I write, I sort of put myself into the character, and if there is a dialogue, I could be the good guy, I could be the bad guy, and I could be the detective that is smart and trying to find the clues. So that's variation give you a sense of, okay, I can do many things. I can write about being in different countries, in different places, in a top scale restaurant, or enjoying a cruise. So it's sort of like being there without being there, just writing. So that's fun, and I wouldn't change that for many things.
It sounds like you like a lot about the writing process, but what do you actually dread about writing?
Oh, I think you know the answer. Marketing,
Yes.
social media. Yeah,
Yes.
I hate that part. I mean, I don't like it. I don't do it well, and I don't like to spend time on that. So obviously, I cannot sell too many books if I don't do a lot of that. But yeah, I would like to just keep writing. The second part, I would say, after marketing and promotion, would be editing process. Sort of it's tedious. You have to go back and forth and change this and change that, and you say, well, the story is the same, so why should I keep doing that? And in my case, it was pretty challenging because English is my second language, as you can realize. And I remember the first book I wrote, and the editor came to me and said, you are not native English speaking, right? And she said, yeah, I have a long way to go about this editing, and she did a good job. Actually, I worked with her many times, but yeah, those two things are things that are, if I have to keep off writing, it was because of that, because the marketing and the effort and all that is just.
Yeah, and again, we prove that even though, we've interviewed dozens of writers, in one certain way, we are all alike. We hate
Yeah,
marketing.
yeah, it's sort of bad.
Okay, so this next question seems almost unfair to ask you because your life is an encyclopedia.
Thank you.
You've done, done so much. But is there a single life experience that you haven't mentioned yet that affects your writing, good or bad?
I think, I think I mentioned that already, but in terms of writing or becoming a writer, the experience of living in a different country by myself, missing a lot of things, sort of focused myself into I need to do something, and writing was the solution. So that was a sort of breaking point, if you call it, in terms of me starting to write something. Then I switched to the different genre, and that was mostly because I said, well, I need to start doing something. So that would be the second event, was retiring from the company. I have time now to write, so I write. So those were the two main events, I would say, in terms of writing.
And that's very similar to what we're doing because we both retired and started writing full time. So it's something
Yeah.
really fun to do later in life.
Yeah. It's down there, and when you have the time, I say, I need to start enjoying life, and writing is enjoyment. So, yeah.
So, would you recommend the writing life to a loved one, and why?
Well, if writing life means you are going to make a living from writing, I would say think twice, because it's hard. And unless you like the marketing and you like the promotions, then could be good. But if you just love the writing, don't think it's so easy. You just write a book and then go. I mean, we all believe that when we start writing and say, I'm going to write a book, and then people are going to knock on my door and buy it. Well, that's not the case. We learn that pretty soon. So I would say, if that's your goal, just be careful with that. If your goal is to have fun and experience the freedom of creating something that is like creating your own movie, then I would say certainly go for it, because you are going to have good times doing that. Depends on where you are. I would recommend that to anybody. Yes.
Excellent points.
Excellent points. Okay, so this could be a fun question for you. What
Okay.
is something unexpected in your past that we won't find in your writer's bio? Something fun.
Yeah, I look at that and say, what happened to me some time ago? And I came out with a couple of things. Well, one was not fun, was just at some point in time, like a few years ago, someone contacted me from Spain with my last name and saying, I'm building this huge family tree and I would like to know better. So I sort of responded and then keep trading sort of communications. And at the end, he had done a great job. And we found that we were like eighth generation cousins, so from the 1800s. And actually, I was planning a trip to Spain, and I went to meet the guy, and then he told me where my ancestor came from, a small village in northern Spain. So I visited there, and the sense was, wow, I feel like home. I don't know why, but I was experimenting and saying, I feel like really this is my place. So that was interesting. Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking, and it was really funny, is that I can say that when I was young, I was a soccer player in college. Now you say, wow, that's interesting, but the story is more interesting. We were in college in Argentina. It's different than here. It's not like each college has a team and all that. There was sort of, in Buenos Aires, there was a big university, and they have these different branches like economics, engineering, and all that. And they have a huge campus for sports. So they would organize these tournaments, soccer tournaments. Soccer in Argentina is a national sport, so everybody wants to play that. So we were a couple of, or a few guys that used to play on the weekend, in parks or any place we found to play that just for fun. And of course, our skills were not as good as someone to be in a tournament. And we say, well, but we would love to play in that tournament, but nobody's going to pick us. So we say, okay, we're going to create our own team. And we don't care if it's winning or losing, probably it's going to be losing. but we are going to have fun. So we created our own team. We picked a name that was, well, in Spanish it's lacra, it's like the worst of the worst. So that was a sport team, the worst of the worst. And we went and played those tournaments. Of course, they divided the teams in 4 teams in the bracket, and we lost the 3 games. And the next year we went back and we won 1 game. And that was a celebration like winning the World Cup. I mean, we were just so excited, and we passed to the next round. Of course, we lost. But I think you're not going to find that in my bio. But it was fun. It was something was interesting. And we enjoyed it.
That's fun because
That's amazing.
Those things like that just shape us for the rest of our lives, and it's just it's okay to have fun. Okay, so Ruben, let's wrap things up. But before we let you go, tell us where we can find you on the internet.
Well, I mean, I have a website. That is rubenbooks.com, and I'm on Facebook, Ruben Elustondo, and there is a page also in Facebook that is the same, Ruben Books. And then I have connection in X and LinkedIn, but I don't use those too much. So the main thing is my website, probably.
And we'll make sure we get that in the blog post so people can click on that and get to where they can find you.
Okay.
So we want to thank Ruben for being on board with us, Ruben Elustondo, for joining us, bringing his worldwide view on the craft and art of writing, and again proving that even though we are thousands of miles apart, we're actually sometimes a little bit closer than we. The CC&JT Amateur Hour is a writer's podcast where we try to help writers write. We've interviewed so many fantastic writers like Ruben, and we've also brought our own things to the table. So we encourage folks to wander out to our website at carsonhume.com. You can find Ruben's episode along with others at the writer's link at the top. Ruben, thank you again for coming on board. It is an honor to meet you.
Well, thank you so much for having me there and sharing my part of my life, and I hope it helps someone. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. It was great meeting you.
It was nice meeting you.
Meeting you.
Okay, take care, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.